Hi, everybody. We're back after a delay. We're actually in a new YouTube stream, a different connection. Are we getting that link out to people? Do we have that link, Chris?
We're working on it.
Okay, we're going to send you a link, and we will, I guess, Zach will stitch these two together to create a recording of the whole. So here's the question that I wanted to throw out. And again, we'll take one more call. Though there aren't that many people watching at this point, they'll come along, 610-616-3208. All right, so Ian Becht created this introductory, this welcome note, and said a couple things about himself. And in the middle of it, he writes, I always feel like I am doing it wrong. And what I'm going to do after I read a little bit of Ian's intro message is ask a bunch of you, Gabby, Max, Dave, Erica, Lainey, Lily, a bunch of you, to respond to this question as a kind of a general piece of advice to ModPo people. Again, he writes, I always feel like I'm doing it wrong. Okay, Ian Becht. Hello, everybody. He realizes he's not alone in the, quote, personally and professionally English engaged, English as in English literature engaged, but poetically challenged club. In other words, I do English, I do lit, but poetry is hard for me. I have a BA in literature several decades ago, have always been a voracious reader of fiction and nonfiction, and currently Ian's job is to teach academic writing, speaking, and linguistics at an English medium, meaning English language university in China. So Ian is in China teaching English. Yet I have often felt that I am an impatient reader. When I encounter a poem, I always feel like I am doing it wrong. It's a bit like my experience with meditation early on. These days, I don't beat myself up if I realize I'd been planning my next vacation after a 20-minute sit. I love week 1. I love week 2. Al, the TAs, and everybody serve as role models and guides. Happy to report I see an immediate parallel with my job. A large undercurrent of what I do is to get these kids to read and actively listen to texts in a critically and creatively engaged manner. I can already see that this course will be a masterclass in that. So what I'd like for you folks to do is to respond with wisdom, advice to Ian and everybody else who feels that when they encounter a poem that somehow they're always doing it wrong. All right, so we're going to start with Gabby, then Max, Dave, Erica, Lainey, and Lily. And then we'll do final words. Gabby, what would you say to Ian briefly? What wisdom do you have?
I would say you have to see what sticks. So I usually try to go, even if it's a sound, like what does this sound like? How does it feel in my mouth? How does it feel when I'm reading it? What does it do for me? If that doesn't give you anything, like what do I think of? What do I find in the lines? What surprises me? What doesn't? It's really a game of like, what's catching my attention and what isn't. And when something catches your attention, all you have to do really, and it's a harder question than it seems, is ask yourself, why did this catch my attention?
Love it. Thank you. Great advice. Max, can you focus on this question of what's wrong, doing it wrong in interpreting a poem or reading a poem or encountering a poem?
I think to think of poetry right as having a sort of right approach or a wrong approach is a very common thing, especially for people who are new to the material, in part because I think when we approach any kind of text, especially a difficult text, in any sort of academic or academic adjacent setting, we start to approach it like philosophy or something, right? Like that there's some sort of information that we need to extract from this, and it's only one kind of information. And if we're getting different kinds of information, then we're doing it wrong, right? The way that we try to like understand a very dense philosophical text. But I think a way of be short-circuiting that impulse is to make a little bit more room for your taste or for your own sort of evaluative judgment, to remind yourself that it's an aesthetic object in many ways, and then to sort of allow yourself to like or dislike a poem, and to start from that point rather than to rather than starting from a point of wondering whether or not you've gotten what was sort of stowed away within the poem. Just to ask yourself, like, is this good? Is this bad? And it's okay to dislike poems too. You know, it's okay to dislike what the teacher assigns. In fact, that's a very important part of the process of actually learning to interpret texts on your own and for yourself.
Really helpful, Max, especially at the beginning. You didn't use the word content, but you were kind of dancing around it. In a way, what you're saying is you think that a poem is supposed to convey some kind of import, some kind of luggage, some kind of content, some kind of matter. And then that can be a mistake because, you know, it's not a matter of getting what that poem is saying by way of content or not. And if you focus on how a poem does what it does, then subjectivity will come in. Really good advice. Dave, Erica, Lainey, Lily, quickly each a thought in response to Ian feeling like he always gets it wrong. Dave?
I really like what was said so far. And this is definitely something that I feel all the time with literally everything. It's an imposter syndrome issue, and it happens, you know, like throughout all sorts of things. But poetry, definitely, because it seems so hard to penetrate at first. And especially when you hear somebody comment on something that never occurred to you, you think, oh, wow, that's right. And I didn't do that. So that you feel like you've done it wrong. And I think that's just that's harmful because we have to just accept that everybody brings something different to poetry. And one thing that I find really helpful is to read a poem and then put it down for a couple days or two and then go back to it. And then I find that when I go back to it again, my mind has, in that interim, somehow been making connections with the text and my life experience in ways that I wouldn't have done if I had just read it once. And at the end of the day, it just seems like it's all about making connections and bringing some of your personal life experience to bear on it too, and then sharing those with everybody else. So if we can just put aside the idea that there's a right and wrong way to approach these things and just go at it in terms of let's find connections and share them and see what comes of it. That might be a helpful approach.
I like that. I think confidence is really associated. Either you gain confidence, yeah, I can do this, or you accept your lack of confidence. The latter is actually, I think, a more healthful approach. Disorientation is something we have to get used to. We're constantly disoriented by our world. We have to adapt to that disorientation and just plow forward. Have to get up in the morning, put your feet on the ground. To go forward. Okay, cool. Erica, Lainey, Lily, lightning round. Quick response to this question. Erica first.
I also often struggle in the ways that Dave was saying, being a fellow imposter syndrome person. A couple of strategies that I use all the time: read poems out loud. Do what's called making a movie of the mind. It's a term that comes from Peter Elbow. So as you are reading a poem, I like to write down what I'm seeing in my head and then come back to that later. And it often helps me figure out how to at least find my way into a poem if I'm really struggling. So those are 2 tips.
It's also a great way to write. That's why Peter Elbow is referring to it. Yeah, that's really cool. Lainey?
I love what's been said so far. And I'll just add, echoing, you can't do it wrong. It's not an equation. There's not one right answer.
But don't you want an A for the class? I mean, you can't do it wrong, really.
No, you can't do it wrong.
Sorry, that was a Charles Bernstein thing, you know, that kind of ridiculous irony.
And you are an ingredient in the poem, or you are the poem. So even if you come to a poem with no context whatsoever, you have no idea what the title means, you know nothing, your initial first encounter with the poem is so important. It only happens one time. And you can always add and gain context and come back to the poem, but your unique immediate experience and noticing what happens, that's important. Ian used the phrase, comparing to meditation, I don't beat myself up in meditation anymore. Well, good. Don't beat yourself up anymore when you come to a poem and you feel like you're banging your head, because as you're hearing, it happens to all of us. But the the overlaying of judgment doesn't help. Instead, what I recommend is come back. It's a relationship. My relationship with a poem, it's lasted 30 years so far. I'm going to keep reading this Niederker poem, however many years I'm alive. So it's a relationship. If I have one conversation with a person and it doesn't go well, I don't think I'm wrong. I can never talk to that person again. It's you come back, and when you come back, it's a different day. You're in a different mood. You've read something else. You've talked to another person. So the poem on the page doesn't change, but we change in our ability. One day I might pick up a book and it's impenetrable. It's almost like it's written in a language I don't read. And the next day it appears clear words that I can understand. So time and patience, and just keep returning.
The reader's relationship to the poem is a moving target, is dynamic, and this is why in week 8 of the course, when we start to read the language poets, we realize that it was an idea whose time had definitely come because of the constant, say, Lynn Haginian in my life, the constant relationship that's changing between you and your life and Lynn in her life, and that can't possibly, by definition, stand still. Let's put a pin in the conversation about meditation and come back to it sometime, not now. But Ian is basically saying, I sit for 20 minutes in meditation and I realize I'm planning my next vacation. What John Ashbery, just to take a poet we admire by random, John Ashbery would say, go on that vacation in your head while you're meditating. Because that's a kind of meditation. That's fine, Okay, Lily, what do you think about this whole question? I know you think about this a lot.
I think it's just important to bring all your normal tools that you would bring to reading anything, to reading poetry. So it's not like cheating to Google a word if you don't know what it means or you're not sure what the poet intends by using it in this context, or if there's like a place name reference, like just look it up, and don't be feeling like, I know we talked a lot about each person brings something specific to the poem, but don't feel like you're only limited to what you're bringing in your head. Like, use your research tools, and that can include talking to someone else and asking if it makes sense to them. And yeah, just bring all of your regular reading comprehension stuff to reading a poem, and don't create more anxiety by thinking of it as something so different from another piece of writing.
Right. Be an active reader, in other words, do stuff. That's really cool. We are going to excerpt that last section, that last group of comments, because I think it would be great for ModPo Plus in our roster of introductory videos, where here we are talking about how to deal with the anxiety you feel about doing it wrong. All right, we have 5 minutes for final thoughts because 11 o'clock is coming up. So that means that we are talking about a word, a phrase, a sentence, some comment that you have as a final thought during week 2, or based on what we've been talking about today, or something that's coming up soon in ModPo. So we're going to start with Max, with Amber Rose on deck. Quick thought, final thought, Max.
There's a lot of great Niederker in ModPo Plus for this week. I recommend diving in there, even if you don't get to all of the main syllabus poems.
Whoa, radical. Go to ModPo Plus, even if you haven't finished the main syllabus. Thank you. Allie is up next. And I'm sorry, Allie, I'm going to put Amber Rose on deck. So it's Allie and then Amber Rose.
I am going to start my office hours. So my office hour usually is at noon today on Wednesday. I'm going to start at 11:30 because I have a doctor appointment. So I am very much looking forward to continuing this conversation. I hope people pop in to say hi.
Thank you. Amber Rose up, and Kinar is on deck.
I'm still on our work conversation, and it's reminding me of another conversation I was having yesterday with someone about trying to find balance in approaching the work, and I was told to keep 2 real or imaginary sticky notes. One that says, "This is just an exercise," and another one that says, "Create to your heart's content." And somewhere in that happy medium, maybe, work lies.
Very practical. I love that. We're being so helpful, I think. Thank you, Ambrose. Kinar and Jason on deck. I think Kinar had to step out, so we're going to go to Jason, and Kate will be on deck. Oh, Kinar's there. There's Kinar. Hi, Kinar. Are you muted?
Hi. Sorry, I lost my Zoom window expander, and I couldn't find the.
This happens.
Function. So yes, sorry, I am here. Well, so my office hours are on Thursday at 6 p.m. and I plan to hold them on Zoom this week. So
Yay.
I hope folks will, stop in. I'm excited to talk about some of the kinds of thresholds, disruptions, moments that are kind of glitchy as a reader in Niedecker or other poets. And I know some folks are interested in reading aloud, so I'd love to also just do some reading if people want to stop into Zoom this week. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Kinar. And you'll post the Zoom link in your office hour thread, and that's where people can get it. And I'm also going to recommend that if anybody's doing a Zoom office hour, and if you feel like, and if everybody agrees to this, turn on the recording and do a close reading of a poem together, collaborative close reading. And then you can send us the recording and we can do a little light editing and post that up. I think that would be great if you're interested in doing that. Okay, so Jason's up with Kate on deck. Jason, final thought? Jason, you're muted, I think.
No, I'm not. My office hour is tomorrow hold on. My office hour, I had a computer, church bells suddenly ringing in my ear, celebrating the hour, but to keep me on track in terms of time. But my office hours will be tomorrow at 8. So if you can't make Knars, come on over to mine and we'll be Zooming and doing poetry therapy and getting through. We'll be using poems to conduct therapy, and we'll be using therapy to conduct poetry. And I'm really interested in, I'm interested in talking about the Ray Armantrout poem Up This Week, which is really hard, I know, but I think we could have a really good, productive chat about it, or about anything else anyone wants to talk about. But I do think that the last 4 stanzas of the Armantrout poem are very apropos to the idea of feeling all the kind of feelings we have about poetry, because poetry brings us back to a point in time that we kind of disavow, where we are playing with language and entering into language as children.
Yes.
And so I can say a whole lot more about that, which I will in the office hours, but I'm just going to change one word in what Armantrout has. And to think of this as a formative portrait, not portrait of the artist, but portrait of the human in language. As a child, I was abandoned in a story made of words. Here's the small gasp of this clearing come upon again.
Nice. Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much. And I will say that we had our first really dissenter post about Armantrout's The Way Usually everybody is very happy and harmonious in the first couple of weeks, and then some people start saying, I don't like it, I don't get it, what the heck is this? And we had a really nice one. I urge everybody to go in there and find that post and respond, not defensively, but just engage. Why do we like the way? Okay, great. So Kate with Gabby on deck, and everybody be brief because we're at the top of the hour. Final thoughts.
I was going to say, I was also sorry we didn't get to Armentrout, because I am so interested someday in having a conversation about how here functions in that poem as opposed to this, and different kinds of location and self-reflexivity in language in poetry. And my office hour is at 10 tomorrow, and if anyone wants, we can have that conversation there.
That would be cool. I'd like to be there. I mean, I am here, saith the Messiah in one context. So that here is very weird because it means that the Son of God in the story, the Son of God is here on the earth, and that's a different kind of here than the terrestrial here that we sometimes mean. I'm really interested in all of that. Thank you, Kate. Gabby, followed by Dave.
Yeah, my final word is that for those of you who care about the Dickinson-Whitman distinction, which is to say you either love it or you hate it, if you have feelings about it, the career of William Carlos Williams is a really interesting site for thinking about, one, why that distinction is useful, and two, why it's sort of arbitrary.
Oh, I like
he
that.
does both.
I like that. I'm obsessed with Williams and would love to talk about that. Dave, followed by Erica.
Quick comment just about, again, about work, and Amber Rose brought up how it implicates an innate desire to exert control over an environment, and it just makes me think about how we struggle against constraints. That can be one way of defining work, but many ways we need those constraints. We need them in order to exert some type of power. It makes me think of hockey fights, because when two players are on the ice and trying to throw punches, if they're just flat on their skates, they don't get any leverage, and they're not exerting power. They're not, putting in the work as much as they can be. So they're trying to get constraints by getting grounding. So in a lot of ways, these constraints that we push against are really necessary for us to do that. Also, I have office hours tonight, and that's all.
That's the first hockey fight analogy in 10 years, I think. So yeah, I'm glad we had that. Erica with Lily on deck, and then Lainey.
I want to go back to the question about the course on innovation and suggest that in the context of a business school, I imagine students are thinking about things like entrepreneurship. And I feel as though a lot of the kinds of experimental writing that we read in this course resonate along those lines. And, I also would just shout out the fact that the pedagogy of ModPo is a very, very different thing that I think that, post or in the midst of the pandemic is something I know I've appreciated and thought a lot about, how different an online learning experience this is from many other Zoom type things.
Thank you, Erica, for that praise of our model, which we did not invent so much as grow into over the years, which is really what it takes. You have to do this a long time. Lily, and then Lainey, final thought.
I just want to make a plug for Canon challenges, not just because I did the one for week 2, but
yours is so
general,
excellent. I just watched it again. It is so good. Oh my gosh. Especially if this is maybe your second or third time going through the course, you might just be interested in thinking about, kind of leading from what Erica said, like our pedagogy at ModPo and what it means to create a modern and contemporary American poetry syllabus. We're always interested in thinking through that work as we've done it in the past and going forward. So I hope you might check out those videos and use them to jumpstart your own thinking or comments about the syllabus making in general. Fantastic. Lainey Brown, final thought.
3 quick things. I'm also a huge fan of Ray's work and the way, and I wanted to recommend the poem talk on that poem.
With Rachel Blau Duplessis, Charles Bernstein, and Ron Silliman.
Right, which I just re-listened to. And also to say, as amazing as it is, it absolutely doesn't exhaust talking about the poem. So I would be glad to talk about it again, even though I talked about it in office hours. And thinking about work, the word play came up and we didn't really get to that. So I just want to throw this out as a question mark. Work as play, play as work. If there's not play in the work, it's not the work for me. And I think for a lot of these writers that we're looking at, the concept of play it's in there. Yeah. And then finally, my office hours are Mondays at noon, and I'm going to be Zooming. Ooh. So please join me.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anand, for calling from Mumbai, and Claire from Manhattan, and also Ian for letting us use your introductory comment to talk about doing it wrong, and Cecilia Flynn, who's stuck at home with the predictable apple eater. We know you're having a good time anyway, but thanks for being part of ModPo, and Elisa Ferguson, who got us started talking about the work, and all of my colleagues, thank you, and Zelda and Chris and Zach, thank you guys, and we hope you enjoy the rest of week 2, and we'll be back a week from today for a week 3 webcast. So have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.